Good morning. Hope everyone are doing well. Uh, Today's class is a bit different from the normal routine class because it is like e-learning. In this, you have to pay more attention. And today we are going to discuss about the important topics in pediatric surgery. As we know, the father of pediatric surgery is William E. Ladd. He is better known for his Ladd's procedure for malrotation. Coming today to today's topic, congenital pyloric hypertrophic stenosis. For any surgical pathology, we have to know the anatomy properly. Coming to the surgical anatomy of the stomach, in brief, we will see the fundus, body, and lesser curvature, greater curvature, and this is the pylorus, pyloric antrum, and pyloric sphincter. Coming to the different layers of the stomach, this is very important because this is the basis for the surgery of the congenital pyloric stenosis. From inside to outside, the layers are mucosa, submucosa, muscularis. This muscularis layer contains two types of muscles. One is innermost circular muscle and the outer longitudinal muscle, and the outermost is the serosa. Again, from the outer, the serosa, which is the outermost layer, and the muscularis layer, which contains the inner circular muscles and the outer longitudinal muscles, submucosa, and the mucosa. Coming to the definition of congenital hypertrophic pyloric stenosis, it's the hypertrophy of musculature of pyloric antrum, especially the circular muscle fibers. Here, the circular muscle fibers are hypertrophied. As you know, hypertrophy is the increase in the size of the cells, whereas hyperplasia is increase in the number of cells. By causing the hypertrophy of the musculature, this causes the primary failure of the pylorus to relax. In this condition, the duodenum is normal. This is a picture showing the pyloric stenosis. This is the hypertrophied circular muscle. There's a doubtful increased risk of developing this condition if the newborn gets erythromycin or the azithromycin antibiotics in the first 14 days after birth. This picture shows the normal pylorus where the lumen is well. In case of pyloric stenosis, it is collapsed and there is the hypertrophy of the circular muscle. Coming to the clinical features, it's common in males 4:1. In the males also, the first-born males are more affected. The incidence is 4 in 1000 births, and this condition is familial, that it runs in families, and it is seen between 3rd and 6th weeks of age of an infant, because this is the time taken by the hypertrophic muscle to cause complete obstruction. It's more common in 3rd and 6th, between 3rd and 6th weeks of the age. Symptoms are vomitings. This vomiting is projectile, forcible, and non-bilious. As the vomiting contains the contents of the stomach, this is non-bilious. As we know, the duodenum is not involved in this condition. Other features like visible gastric peristalsis, that is from left to right direction. This is the picture showing visible gastric peristalsis. We also see a palpable lump. This is the most important clinical picture of the hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. This is better felt from the left side. This is mobile and it is olive-like mass which is smooth and firm in consistency with well-defined borders. This moves with respiration and on percussion it is dull note. Other features like constipation, because of repeated vomitings, the newborn will be dehydrated and there will be loss of weight. The common electrolyte imbalance we see in this clinical pathology is hypokalemic metabolic alkalosis. Due to the repeated vomitings, the HCl is lost, resulting in metabolic alkalosis. How do you diagnose this condition? That is mostly the clinical examination by seeing the visible gastric peristalsis, olive-shaped mass, and coming to investigative part, ultrasound abdomen, it's the most useful and most important investigation. In the ultrasound abdomen, you see the Downett sign, which is like a ring-shaped structure seen at the pylorus region, and the pyloric muscle thickness will be 4 mm or more than that, and the length of the pyloric canal will be more than 14 mm. And I once again repeat, on ultrasound you see the downward sign, that is the ring shaped sign. And on the cross section you see the cervix sign on the long axis. See, this is the hypertrophic pylorus and this is the lumen of the pylorus. In this image you can also see the distended stomach with the fluid in the stomach with the food particles which are enhancing. On the contrast studies are the one which we use the barium contrast. These are not commonly done. However, if you do, we will see double track sign or railroad tracks. See, this is the contrast image showing dilated stomach with hypertrophied pyloric muscle with lumen of the pylorus. This is the railroad track or double track sign. Coming to the differential diagnosis for this condition, it is duodenal atresia. How do you differentiate the duodenal atresia from congenital pyloric stenosis? In case of duodenal atresia, as duodenum is involved, you will see bilious vomiting. However, in case of congenital pyloric stenosis, you will see non-bilious vomitings. The other conditions are high intestinal obstruction like volvulus neonatorium and intracranial hemorrhage. These are the differential diagnosis for congenital pyloric stenosis. Coming to the treatment part, it is the correction of dehydration by intravenous fluid supplementation and electrolyte imbalance. Surgery point of view, it is Ramsher's pyloromyotomy. It is pyloromyotomy, it is cutting of the muscle, not the mucosa. After laparotomy, that is after opening the abdomen, the hypertrophied muscle is cut along the whole length adequately until the mucosa bulges out. In this Ramsher's pyloromyotomy, mucosa should not be opened. In case if there is an accidental injury to the mucosa, it should be sutured at that spot using vicryl or silk sutures. So this is the diagram showing Ramsher's pyloromyotomy. Myotomy is the cutting the muscle fibers, not the mucosa, pyloromyotomy. In this picture, you are giving an incision over the pylorus and splitting the muscle fibers and cutting. Once the muscle fibers are cut, the mucosa will be protruded out. This shows the surgery is adequate. Protrusion of the mucosa. The mucosa should not be injured. Nowadays, laparoscopic pyloromyotomy is also becoming very popular. In the previous image, you are seeing that instruments are held by the surgeon himself, whereas in case of laparoscopy, you are seeing that these are the laparoscopic instruments. There is also another technique like endoscopic pyloromyotomy. It is we are using endoscope to cut these muscle fibers. This is more or similar like the POEM for eclasia cardia. POEM is per oral endoscopic myotomy, which is used for eclasia cardia, is a esophageal disorder. And balloon dilatation is also tried, but the results are not optimum like surgery or myotomy. So the ideal procedure for congenital pyloric stenosis is Ramsher's pyloromyotomy. The postoperative complications like postoperative pyrexia, or there is an increase in the temperature, gastroenteritis, electrolyte imbalance. The medical treatment, it's not advisable because the cure is not guaranteed. Medically you can like atropine, these are not advisable. This is in case of neonates, newborns, congenital pyloric stenosis. While coming to the adults, this pyloric stenosis will cause gastric outlet obstructions, which is also known as GOO, gastric outlet obstruction, which is due to stenosis at the pyloric region. What are the causes for gastric outlet obstruction in case of an adult? The common causes are gastric cancer and chronic peptic ulceration. Previously, it is the peptic ulcer which stands first, but with the advancement of PPIs, this condition has been decreased, and now gastric cancer is the most common cause for gastric outlet obstruction, followed by secondary to peptic ulceration. However, in case of adults, pyloric stenosis is normally a misnomer. Why? Because in adults, the pyloric stenosis is secondary to the peptic ulcer or CA stomach. In case of peptic ulcer, The most common site for peptic ulcer is first part of duodenum, which is most commonly involved. This in turn causes gastric outlet obstruction. So, in long-standing or chronic duodenal ulcers, there will be scarring and cicatrization, and the pain will be severe, persistent in the epigastric region, and it is also with feeling of fullness. In case of vomitings in adults, it will be large quantity, foul smelling, and frothy. This vomitus contains food consumed on the previous day. This is the characteristic of the gastric outlet obstruction in adults. Partially digested or undigested food, if is present in the vomitus, the pathology is in the stomach. Visible gastric peristalsis is also seen in adults. This is elicited by asking the patient to drink a cup of water. The other clinical finding is succussion splash. This succussion splash is elicited in gastric outlet obstruction patients by keeping the patient empty for 4 hours, and after that you have to keep the stethoscope over the epigastric region, and with using the two hands of the surgeon you have to shake the patient adequately. So I once again repeat that on succussion splash, you have to ask the patient to be empty for 4 hours, and the stethoscope has to be placed over the epigastric region, and by using the both the hands you have to shake the patient adequately. On doing this maneuver, if you are hearing the splashing sounds, if you are hearing splashing sounds, that it indicates that fluid is in the stomach. This is the positive succussion splash, which is characteristic of gastric outlet obstruction. The other test, clinical test, is auscultopercussion test. In case of succussion splash, you will shake the patient. In case of auscultopercussion test, you will percuss the patient. This auscultopercussion test shows dilated stomach. In this test, two surgeons or two doctors are used to perform this test. One is keeping their epigastric stethoscope over the epigastric region. The other person will be scratching or percussing the skin. Here in this test, the stethoscope is placed over the epigastric region, and the skin is scratched from left side downwards at several points away from the epigastric using the finger. After this, all the points has to be joined. This shows the greater curvature of the stomach. See, the stethoscope has to be placed in the epigastric region, and you have to percuss away from stethoscope, and once the dullness is heard you have to point that area, and then you have to join all these points. This indicates the greater curvature of the stomach. Normally the greater curvature of the stomach is midway between the xiphisternum and umbilicus, but in case of gastric outlet obstruction it will be below the umbilicus, indicating that the stomach is dilated. In this test you can see the stomach by seeing the greater curvature of the stomach. You can feel the stomach by percussing it, and by on ausculting you can hear the stomach. See, normally greater curvature of the stomach is above the level of umbilicus, midway between umbilicus and epigastrium. In gastric outlet obstruction it lies below the level of umbilicus. So in auscultopercussion test you can see the stomach, that is greater curvature of the stomach can be seen. You can feel the stomach, that while percussing there will be change in the note from tympanic to dullness, that is you will feel the stomach. And by ausculting with the help of stethoscope you can also hear the stomach, that is the splashing sounds. The other clinical features are confused status because of electrolyte changes. What are the electrolyte changes in case of gastric outlet obstruction in adults? These electrolyte changes are unique because in case of gastric outlet obstruction, there will be metabolic alkalosis and also paradoxical aciduria. And the other metabolic changes are hypochloremic, hyponatremia, hypokalemia, hypocalcemia, and hypomagnesemia. So, coming to the metabolic changes, because of repeated vomitings, the HCl which is produced in the stomach is lost. So, the hydrogen ions and chloride ions are lost. This will leads to hypochloremia and metabolic alkalosis. As HCl is lost, this is metabolic alkalosis, and initially the sodium and potassium will be normal. However, because of repeated vomiting, the patient will go into dehydration, and once there is dehydration, this will cause effect over the renal parameters, leading to uh, sodium loss. Once the sodium is lost, the aldosterone will come into the picture, and it will try to save the sodium, leading to sodium absorption and potassium secretion. So when trying to regain the sodium, there will be excretion of potassium, leading to hypokalemia. When there is severe hypokalemia, to save the potassium ions, there will be losing of the hydrogen ions in the urine, which cause aciduria. So even the patient is suffering with metabolic alkalosis. That the inside the patient, the condition is metabolic alkalosis. However, but in the urine, there will be loss of acid. So this is paradoxical aciduria. So the important electrolyte imbalance in case of gastric outlet obstruction is metabolic alkalosis with paradoxical aciduria. See, the causes for gastric outlet obstruction is, one is the benign condition peptic ulcer disease, the other is the CS stomach. Whereas this electrolyte imbalances will be more pronounced in case of benign and it is less in case of malignancy. It is notable that the metabolic abnormalities may be less if the obstruction is due to malignancy. In case of malignancy, the metabolic abnormalities will be less. This is the clinical features of the gastric outlet obstruction. Like, one is visible gastric peristalsis, succussion slash auscultopercussion test, and electrolyte imbalance. Now, coming to the investigative part, one is the contrast studies, that is barium meal studies. In this, you will see the absence of duodenal cap and dilated stomach, where the greater curvature is well below the level of or at the level of iliac crust, and barium will not be passing into the duodenum due to the outlet obstruction. And endoscopy, this endoscopy is the important investigation because it helps us to rule out the carcinoma stomach, and if you have any doubt, you can take endoscopic biopsy also to determine whether the cause of this problem is malignancy or not. So endoscopy is an important investigation in case of gastric outlet obstruction. The other investigations are like, once you have to rule out the electrolyte imbalances, so you have to go for complete electrolyte studies, that is sodium, potassium. And also if you are suspecting any um, potassium changes like hypokalemia, then ECG to be ordered. Now, how do you treat this adult gastric outlet obstruction? This is with the correction is of like dehydration and electrolytes. The first important step is correcting the dehydration and electrolytes. Dehydration is corrected with the help of IV fluids, normal saline and double strength saline, or supplementation of calcium, potassium, magnesium. If the patient is found to be like anemic, then blood transfusion has to be done. And total parenteral nutrition support also. As the patient is not taking anything by oral, you have to supplement with TPN, total parenteral nutrition. After correcting the dehydration and electrolytes, a stomach wash has to be given with the help of a nasogastric tube or long one like orogastric tube. Stomach wash has to be given with the help of normal saline. This is used to clean the stomach contents. And this is also used to reduce the edema of the stomach and improves gastric emptying time by increasing the gastric muscle tone. So, in case of adult gastric outlet obstruction, stomach wash has to be given with the help of normal saline, which has the advantages like reducing the edema of the stomach and improves the gastric emptying time by increasing the gastric muscle tone. If the gastric outlet obstruction is due to the peptic ulcer disease, then aggressive medical therapy with using proton pump inhibitors has to be used. This often leads to resolution of the symptoms. Whereas endoscopic dilatation of gastric outlet may be effective in less severe cases of benign stenosis. Our operation is frequently required with a drainage procedure. Drainage procedures are like gastrojejunostomy, pyloroplasty, all should be performed for benign disease. And if it is a malignant, then appropriate resection has to be taken. So different types of surgeries are like highly selective vagotomy with gastrojejunostomy. You know different types of vagotomy like truncal vagotomy, selective vagotomy, and highly selective vagotomy. In case of truncal vagotomy, both the vagus at the level of the trunks has to be ligated, whereas in case of selective vagotomy, you have to spare the hepatic branch and celiac branch. In case of highly selective vagotomy, only the nerve supply to the pyloric part is the ligated and with the gastrojejunostomy procedure. The other ones are like truncal vagotomy along with gastrojejunostomy. In case of malignancy, resectional procedure has to be added like antrectomy, that is acid secreting area should be removed with vagotomy, and Billroth 1 anastomosis like gastroduodenal anastomosis along with feeding jejunostomy for nutrition is another option. So the important causes or the common causes for gastric outlet obstruction in the adults are the peptic ulcer and CS stomach. The other less common causes are adult pyloric stenosis, uh, that is pyloroplasty. The surgery for adult pyloric stenosis is pyloroplasty, not pyloromyotomy. This pyloromyotomy is for congenital problem. And the other common one is the pyloric mucosal diaphragm. If there's a pyloric mucosal diaphragm, it should be excised surgically or endoscopically. So I once again will revise the congenital pyloric stenosis. It is seen in newborns of 8th, 3rd to 6th week, and with the symptoms like vomiting, which is non-bilious projectile, and visible gastric peristalsis is seen, and investigations it is ultrasound, and coming to the treatment part it is Ramsha's pyloromyotomy. Girish.